The story begins in the bustling heart of the city, where wealth and poverty often brushed shoulders in sharp contrast. In one of the finest ballrooms, filled with chandeliers that glittered like stars and floors polished to a mirror-like shine, the millionaire's presence dominated the room. Known for his sharp wit and merciless humor, he enjoyed the power his wealth gave him over others. On this particular evening, his attention fell upon a humble waitress who had been serving guests quietly, moving among them with careful precision. She was no stranger to hardship, carrying herself with a quiet dignity despite the struggles of her life. Her worn apron and modest dress stood in stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her, yet there was a spark in her eyes, something unshakable, even in the face of wealth and ridicule. The millionaire, amused by the idea of toying with someone he deemed beneath him, approached her with a mocking smile. "If you dance this tango with me," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "I'll marry you." The statement, though framed as a challenge, was intended as an insult, a public spectacle meant to humiliate her. He leaned back slightly, expecting laughter from his friends and guests, confident that no one in their right mind would ever take such a dare seriously. To him, it was a game, a way to assert dominance, to prove that wealth and social status could bend anyone to his whims. For the waitress, the word stung, but not for the reason he anticipated. She was used to life's hardships. Rejection, scorn, and judgment had been her constant companions. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a quiet strength. She understood the stakes, not just the public scrutiny, but the deeper challenge of dignity versus humiliation. This was more than a dance, it was a test of courage, a chance to claim her own respect in a world that often dismissed people like her. As the room held its breath, the millionaire's smirk grew, fully expecting a polite refusal or a flustered excuse. But what he did not anticipate was that the waitress, instead of shrinking back, straightened her posture, held her head high, and met his gaze with a calm determination. In that instant, she transformed from a simple server into a woman who refused to be underestimated, whose courage shone brighter than any chandelier in the hall. Her acceptance of the challenge, quiet yet resolute, was the first step in turning the millionaire's mocking game into an unforgettable story of pride, skill, and unexpected triumph. The moment the millionaire's challenge hung in the air, the room seemed to freeze. Every guest's attention turned toward the humble waitress, whose life had never known luxury or applause. Yet, in that instant, something remarkable happened. She didn't falter. Instead of shrinking under the weight of his mockery, she straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and took a slow, deliberate breath. There was a quiet intensity in her eyes, a mixture of determination, courage, and the kind of self-respect that cannot be bought or mocked away. Accepting the challenge was more than just an act of bravery, it was a statement. She was declaring, without words, that her worth could not be measured by wealth, social status, or the judgment of others. While the millionaire had intended to humiliate her, she was about to turn the situation entirely on its head. With a small, confident smile, she stepped forward. The clinking of glasses and whispered speculations filled the room, but she seemed to move in her own bubble of focus, unaffected by the audience. Each step she took toward the dance floor radiated poise and quiet defiance. Her acceptance carried an air of dignity that immediately shifted the atmosphere. No longer was she simply a poor waitress performing a task, she was a woman willing to confront a challenge head-on, unafraid of the consequences. The millionaire, who had expected surprise, hesitation, or even fear, found himself caught off guard. Her calm, assured nod was not just an agreement to dance, it was a challenge back to him, a subtle reclaiming of power. The audacity of her confidence stunned the onlookers, who began to murmur in astonishment. The waitress knew she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. She had danced before in small, private moments, perhaps at local gatherings or family celebrations, but never under the glaring spotlight of society's elite, never with the world judging her every movement. Yet, rather than faltering, she embraced the pressure. Every ounce of fear was transformed into determination, and every glance from the millionaire's mocking eyes fueled her resolve. She understood that this dance was more than a performance, it was a declaration of self-worth, a moment to demonstrate that courage and grace could exist even in the harshest circumstances. As she extended her hand toward the millionaire, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The simple act of taking his offered hand became symbolic. She was ready to meet his challenge, not with fear or submission, but with dignity, skill, and unwavering confidence. In that instant, the balance of power subtly shifted, hinting that this evening would not end as the millionaire had imagined, and that the waitress was about to transform a mocking dare into a story of triumph and unexpected glory. The music began, soft at first, then swelling with the rhythmic pulse of a passionate tango. The ballroom, once filled with laughter and idle chatter, fell into a hushed anticipation. All eyes were on the waitress and the millionaire as they stepped onto the polished floor, a space that suddenly seemed both vast and intimate. She could feel the weight of the room's gaze, but instead of trembling, she drew strength from it. Every fiber of her being focused on the rhythm, the beat, and the unspoken challenge that had been laid before her. From the very first step, it was clear that she was no ordinary dancer. Her movements were precise, elegant, and infused with a natural grace that made the millionaire, and everyone watching, pause in astonishment. Each step of the tango was a conversation, sharp, passionate, and filled with intention. She twirled and glided across the floor, her body perfectly attuned to the music, responding to its rises and falls with seamless fluidity. The elegance of her posture, the intensity in her eyes, and the confidence in her every gesture turned the once dismissive crowd into silent spectators, captivated by her performance. The millionaire, who had expected a timid, awkward display, was taken aback. The waitress' skill and poise were undeniable. His own smirk faltered as he realized that this was no mere dance, it was a display of courage, dignity, and hidden talent. Every movement she made seemed to defy his assumptions, challenging his perception of who she was and what she was capable of. He tried to keep up, but the spotlight had shifted entirely. She was no longer performing for him or anyone else, she was performing for herself, claiming her space and her moment with every step. As the tango progressed, her connection with the music deepened. Her feet moved with confidence and precision, her turns and dips executed with an elegance that seemed almost effortless. There was fire in her expression, a quiet defiance, and a determination to turn this moment into something unforgettable. The ballroom seemed to fade away, leaving only the dance, the music, and the electrifying energy between the two performers. By the final note, the crowd erupted in applause, some in disbelief, others in admiration. The waitress had not only accepted a mocking challenge but had transformed it into a mesmerizing performance that left everyone, including the millionaire, in awe. The dance had proven more than her talent, it had shown her courage, her dignity, and her unshakable confidence. In that moment, she had transcended the boundaries of wealth and status, capturing the admiration of all and leaving the millionaire to confront a truth he had never anticipated: she was extraordinary, and she could not be underestimated. As the last notes of the tango faded into the glittering ballroom, an almost tangible silence settled over the room. The once snickering crowd now stared in stunned admiration. The millionaire, who had approached the challenge with arrogance and mockery, found himself at a loss. His smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of genuine astonishment. The confident, mocking man who had believed wealth alone could command obedience and submission was now confronted with a reality he had never anticipated: the waitress, humble and underestimated, had outshone him completely. He looked at her, really looked, for the first time, not as a poor waitress, not as a subject of amusement, but as a woman of remarkable courage, talent, and poise. Every movement she had made during the dance had spoken volumes about her character, her determination, her self-respect, and her refusal to be defined by others' opinions. In that instant, he realized that all his money, power, and influence could never create the kind of strength and dignity she carried so effortlessly. It was a revelation that shook him more deeply than he could have imagined. The applause around them swelled, but he hardly noticed it. He was focused entirely on her, the way she held her head high, the calm confidence in her eyes, and the quiet grace that seemed to emanate from every part of her being. For a man accustomed to control, to being the center of attention, to having the world bend to his will, this was an unfamiliar and humbling experience. He began to see her not as someone beneath him, but as someone extraordinary, someone who had turned his mocking challenge into a powerful statement of self-worth. He felt a mix of emotions he had never expected: admiration, respect, and even a twinge of remorse for having underestimated her. In that moment, he understood that the power dynamics he had always relied upon, wealth, status, and intimidation, were meaningless in the face of courage and integrity. She had reminded him that true strength comes not from money or influence, but from confidence, determination, and the courage to face challenges with dignity. The millionaire's reaction was subtle at first, a silent nod of acknowledgement, a look that conveyed respect where before there had been mockery. Yet it was enough to signal a profound shift. The world he had tried to control, the assumptions he had made, and the games he had played suddenly seemed trivial. He had glimpsed a truth that humbled him: some victories cannot be bought, some respect cannot be demanded, they must be earned. And in that dazzling ballroom, under the gaze of everyone present, the waitress had earned it, leaving the millionaire to confront a reality far more profound than he had ever imagined. The final moments of the evening were nothing short of extraordinary. The applause from the ballroom still echoed, but it was more than just appreciation for a beautiful dance, it was a recognition of courage, dignity, and the triumph of the human spirit. The waitress had not only accepted an impossible challenge but had turned it into a moment that none present would ever forget. The millionaire, still trying to process what had just happened, found himself profoundly changed. His laughter, once sharp and condescending, had given way to awe and respect. In that instant, the world he thought he controlled shifted, and he realized that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in character, courage, and self-respect. The unexpected outcome of the challenge became clear to everyone. The waitress, who had entered the ballroom unnoticed and underestimated, emerged as the true heroine of the night. She had turned a moment intended to humiliate her into a statement of her strength. The millionaire, who had once mocked her, could no longer see her as someone beneath him. Instead, he saw her as extraordinary, someone whose talent and determination transcended the barriers of class and privilege. For the first time, he confronted a reality that money and arrogance could not alter: admiration and respect had to be earned, and she had earned it effortlessly. What followed was a profound shift in their dynamic. The crowd sensed it as well: the way the millionaire's posture softened, the way his eyes lingered on her with a newfound respect. He had underestimated her, and that misjudgment had been his undoing. In a way, the dance had leveled the playing field, revealing that true worth is not measured by wealth but by heart, courage, and dignity. The waitress had proven that even the humblest among us can rise to the occasion, defy expectations, and leave an indelible mark on those who witness their strength. Some versions of the story suggest that this event led to a deeper connection between them. Whether through admiration, mutual respect, or the sparks of an unexpected romance, the encounter transformed both their lives. The millionaire was no longer the same man who had entered the ballroom with arrogance. He had learned humility, the power of genuine respect, and the value of seeing people for who they truly are. The waitress, meanwhile, had demonstrated to herself and everyone around her that courage and self-confidence could turn even the cruelest challenge into a triumph. In the end, the story became a timeless reminder: life's greatest victories often come not from wealth or influence, but from the quiet bravery of standing tall, seizing the moment, and refusing to be defined by the expectations of others. That evening, the humble waitress had danced her way into legend, proving that dignity, courage, and grace are forces no mockery can ever defeat.